G'day there, my name's Ben Everingham and I'm the director here at Pumped On Property, and in today's video I'm going to talk about 10 things, that's right, 10 things that you need to know before you build an investment property in Brisbane. So if it's your first time to my channel, welcome. My name's Ben Everingham and I've helped buy over $150 million worth of property in Brisbane in the last 3 years. I've also bought and built over 11 properties in the last 10 years for myself, with a lot of those properties being in Brisbane lately. So I hope you get a huge amount of value out of today's video. I'm going to talk about buying your own land and selecting the right builder. I'm going to talk about the parts of the Brisbane market in today's video that are the best to actually buy in and the places to avoid in Brisbane, as well as particular suburbs and areas within Brisbane that represent great value. I'm going to talk about what land size you should be targeting, the things you should be focusing on with the builder and with the street that you're targeting, as well as the things that you should be avoiding in Brisbane right now. I'm going to be talking about how negotiable builders are on price and what you can expect price-wise in the Brisbane market right now, as well as some things around rental returns and dual income property as well. So it's going to be an action-packed video, but for those of you thinking of building in Brisbane right now, it's a must-see video and something that I wish I'd seen before I'd built the last 5 or 6 houses I have personally myself. So let's get started. The first thing I wanted to talk about is that most house and land packages in Brisbane, particularly those in South Brisbane, the North Gold Coast, Ipswich, and the very north side of Brisbane, are completely overpriced. Now, whether you're buying it through a property marketer, a property spruiker, someone from an event, an accountant, a financial planner, if they're not charging you for that fee to go and find you that property, they're generally making an undisclosed commission behind the scenes, which is generally in the vicinity of between $20,000 and $50,000 more than the property should cost. Then when you buy these packages, the developers sell them for a premium, the builders are making a premium, and you end up paying, in many instances, somewhere between $30,000 up to $100,000 more than you really should. So that's the number one thing and lesson to learn. If you're looking at buying a turnkey house and land package, particularly in those parts of Brisbane where there's lots of vacant land and you're getting sold this turnkey product, then you're probably overpaying for it. So a better strategy for Brisbane right now is to go to the development and directly buy your own piece of land at the best price you can, and then go to the marketplace and talk to 1 to 3 builders and get some fixed price quotes from those guys with a similar design so that you compare apples with apples and make sure you get the absolute right price. And I'll talk about some of the better builders in Brisbane later in this video. So it's really important to not just get an average house and land package that you're overpaying for in most instances, and to really find your own land and find your own builder. Now, the second thing is, in Brisbane, this is a personal preference for me, because as an investor and as someone who is obsessed about making short and long-term returns, paying too much is one thing, but buying in the wrong estate is also another thing. So when I'm buying a piece of land for me to build in, it's generally in a completely established suburb where there's houses that have been there for the last 10 to sort of 100 years, and I'm finding a piece of land in between the existing houses, as opposed to going to a greenfield site where there's hundreds of years worth of vacant land sitting there just waiting for the developers to come and cut up. And so generally the rule of thumb is the further you get away from the city, in that sort of 30, 40, 50k radius, the more vacant land there is in Brisbane, which means you're generally buying and building in a brand new estate where everything around you is the same, as opposed to an established area where a beautiful brand new product really stands out and gets a premium value as well as a premium rental return. The third thing I wanted to talk about is some data and some history on Brisbane. So if we look at the past, Brisbane as of 2018 has had a pretty shitty 10-year run. But if we look at the last 20 years in Brisbane, the average house has gone up in value by over 8% per annum. And if we look at the last 50 years, the average house has gone up by over 9% a year. So we know that the long-term performance in Brisbane's been very strong. But what's really important is when you break down the data and you don't just wrap a big blanket around Brisbane and you start to look at specific areas, it's very clear which areas of Brisbane have actually performed better over time. And those are generally the suburbs, either walking distance to the beach or within 5 to 20 kilometres of the CBD. And I'm talking specifically about houses here because, again, we know that houses in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane outperform units in townhouses. So if you can afford it, try and target an existing infill block in a suburb between 5 and 20 k's of the city, or a suburb directly on the waterfront. If you can't, then obviously make the best possible decision for you where you are right now. Now, the fourth thing I wanted to talk about is what is the average size of a piece of land in Brisbane? As a lot of ladies would say, bigger is better, and that's definitely the case in Brizzy. So what we're saying there is the average size of a piece of land in a existing suburb that's been subdivided is generally 400 square metres. In some of the estates further away from the city, you're getting land sizes at 200, 250 square metres, up to 800 square metres depending on the estate and what they're trying to achieve. But the average infill block's about 400 square metres, and a really good sized block, if you can find one, would be 500 to sort of 700 square metres. So that's the rule of thumb. 400 metres feels a lot smaller than it used to, but if you're building a nice product, you can still really make that land size work for you. Now, the fifth thing I wanted to talk about is the things that I think you should really focus on if you're building a home in Brisbane. Now, you want a good sized piece of land, you want it to be in a quiet street, you want it to have a good orientation, hopefully with an east or a north facing backyard, because it does get hot up here and orientation means a lot. I want it to have a nice large living, dining, kitchen area opening up onto an alfresco, onto a backyard. That is what tenants love up here, and that's what people looking to buy your property in the future will love as well. I want good sized bedrooms as well in the property, as well as a good sized home. There's no point buying a great piece of land in a great location and then undercapitalizing with what you build on it. So there's some of the major things to focus on. Some of the things to avoid are the same things when you're building. For some reason we have these two hats, and a lot of people go, I'm buying an existing home, I'm building a brand new home. That didn't look very cool, but that was kind of like me putting my hat on. But for some reason we don't do the level of due diligence when we're building brand new as we would if we were moving into an existing home to live in with our family for the future. But I treat investing like I treat finding my family home. I want the best quality home that is going to serve me and my family for not just this generation but future generations to come as well, because creating wealth through property and through building properties is all about finding the highest quality product. And so some of the things that I would avoid in Brisbane is obviously areas with flood issues. There's particular suburbs that are notorious in Brisbane for this, but the cool thing about Brisbane is you can jump on the Brisbane City Council's website, the Moreton Bay Regional Council's website, the Logan website, and you can actually produce flood reports, because there are some issues up here from that perspective, like there's bushfire issues in Melbourne and Sydney. It's just about being aware of that and making sure that the block, you're doing your due diligence on it. You also don't want any major easements over the block, so any sewer lines, any water mains running through them, any manholes, those types of things, because that can impact your ability to build and where you build. You want to definitely check Housing Commission, because like Sydney and Melbourne, there are suburbs and pockets of suburbs that do have higher percentages of Housing Commission. The easiest way to check that is to get the agent selling the property to do to basically produce a report on every single property in the street, and you can identify if it says Queensland Government owns the property, or a number of properties in the street, then that means it's a Housing Commission home, and you've just got to be aware of that. You want to avoid average suburbs. Now, because Brisbane's 15 years behind Melbourne and probably 10 years behind Sydney, you know, we're talking about suburbs in Brisbane still being, some suburbs in Brisbane, particularly further out from the city, being a little bit average with a little bit lower demographics. So, you know, identify that premium quality suburb and make sure you build the right product for that suburb as well as looking at the parts of the suburb that you're buying in. Now, it's not just good enough in Brisbane to buy a suburb and the rising tide over the next 10 years is going to pull that suburb up. It's really, really important to buy the right part of the suburb, which means if you're buying near the beach, closer to the water, if you're buying near the city, on quiet streets where more expensive homes sell, where more owner-occupiers live. So you don't want to buy directly on train lines, on main roads, next to commercial, if you can help it. And all of those things that you personally wouldn't want to live in if it was your forever home. Now, the seventh thing I'm going to talk about is how negotiable are actually builders and developers in Brisbane. And it really depends on the timing of the cycle. When it's easy to get money and everyone's buying and it's easy to get money from the banks, then obviously it's very hard to negotiate with builders on price and developers on price because they've just got so much work and so much demand. But when times get a little bit harder, they can be very, very negotiable up here and everywhere else in Australia because they need to move their products. So I think what's important to understand is that just because a builder gives you a price in Brisbane doesn't mean it's final. You can always negotiate back on price with them, and you should definitely do that. Sometimes you can save yourself between 5 and 20 grand just doing that. In terms of developers as well, in a lot of the greenfield estates, they set the price and stick to it and that is it. But in a lot of these infill blocks, it's just average mums and dads like me and you subdividing a block, and they need to sell them. So they are often more negotiable around that price point of the lot. Generally, you can find what the average discount in the suburb is based on having a look in Google and just typing the suburb name plus average vendor discount. And let's say that a property is worth, a piece of land's worth $300,000 and the average vendor discount in the suburb is 3%. The average vendor discount is basically the price on realestate.com when it first comes online to the price it actually sells for. So what's important and interesting about that is, you know, if it's a 3% discount on a $300,000 home, then the average property is actually selling for $9,000 cheaper or 3% less than the 300K price point. So use that average vendor discount as a guide in the sand, and obviously try and negotiate as hard as you possibly can, because the cheaper you buy the property, the better rent return, the more equity you make on the way in, and the better potential for long-term sustainability and reducing your risk. So the eighth thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going to stop using my hands because I'm going to run out of fingers soon, is new properties in Brisbane, particularly in the existing suburbs where there's not a lot of brand new stock, actually rent for a massive premium. You know, you can get much better rental returns on those types of properties than you can the existing older stock. So people in Brisbane, because there's not a lot of brand new stock around, really value, particularly close to the city and on the water, brand new stuff, and you can get really good rental returns from them, as well as the depreciation benefits. And if you buy the property at the right price and build the right price, you can make some money on the way in. And we all know that the long-term performance over Brisbane over the next 20 years is going to be solid too, based on CoreLogic, RP data, Residex, and the history, as well as what's expected to come. Now, in parts of Brisbane, this is the second last thing I wanted to touch on before I get on to builders in Brisbane, is parts of Brisbane allow you, Brisbane being a huge catchment area, you know, Brisbane, allow you to build dual income property, which means a house with a granny flat or two incomes from the one property. Now, Brisbane City Council at the time of recording this video, which is 2018, doesn't allow you to actually build a dual income property and legally rent it out to an unrelated party. So put a line around Brisbane City Council, and unfortunately you can't do that right now. But other pockets of Brisbane allow you to do this. So in North Brisbane, which is Moreton Bay Regional Council, you can do this. You can also do it on the Sunshine Coast as long as the land size and the frontage is right. You can do it in South Brisbane, which is the Logan Council, and West Brisbane, which is the Ipswich Council. So Southeast Queensland is really 7 local council areas, and 4 of those 7 local council areas you can legally build and rent out granny flats at the time of recording this video. But keep in touch with planning policy because it does change. Make sure that if you do want to build dual income property, you do your flood check, you do your housing commission check during your due diligence period on the block. You also do a town planning check to make sure that you can legally do a dual income property before you buy the place and then realize you can't, and the whole strategy or the intention that you bought the block for doesn't work out. I love dual income properties personally. I've owned a couple of them. I'm building one of them at the moment. they do very, very well in Brisbane in the right suburb where the rental vacancy rate is low and there's not a lot of that brand new dual income style product. So the last thing I want to talk about, or the 10th thing in this video, is really who do you actually work with if you're thinking about building up here. So obviously, you know, like 80% of people that will buy in Brisbane will get a house and land package, which I really don't like or recommend. The second option is to go and do it yourself, so to find a piece of land, to go out and interview builders and to try and do the best thing for yourself. The third thing is to potentially work with a buyer's agent like myself, who for a fee can help you identify the right suburb, educate you on the Brisbane marketplace, find the right piece of land, introduce you to the right builder and project manage the entire thing on your behalf, including all of the council stuff that you need to do to get you the right outcome. You know, the fourth thing is to just go directly to a builder and see if they have any land available and to work in with them. But there's so many different ways of doing this. Now, I've worked with over 10 different builders with my clients and myself over the last 3 years in Brisbane. I've got 2 that I really respect and like at the moment, based on the quality of their work, which is very important, their price point, which is very important for my clients. They generally provide a really, really decent discount on market rates, and also the time frames that they deliver in and the ease of working with them. So they take care of a lot of the things like the compliance, like the certification, like the approvals with council. They produce the product in a short period of time. The average build time with these guys is between 12 and 16 weeks, and the quality of the product, having built a number of properties with them myself, has been quite high for the price. So again, for any of those of you that have found a piece of land and would like an introduction to a builder, feel free to jump over to my website, www.pumpedonproperty.com. Be happy to introduce you to the guys I work with. If you're looking for a hand and really looking to build a home or a dual income property in Brisbane, I'd love the opportunity to learn more about where you're at and what you're looking to achieve, and then to design a strategy to get into Brisbane in a brand new product that achieves the right rental return, achieves the long-term capital growth, hopefully makes a little bit of money on the way in, and also just gives you that security that you've bought the right suburb at the right time and you've built the right type of product in it that is going to rent very, very well. So really appreciate your time and attention today. We did talk about a lot of things. So these are the 10 things that you need to know from my perspective to consider building an investment property in Brisbane. So don't buy an overpriced house and land package. If you're going to do it yourself, find your own piece of land and find your own builder. If you're looking to outsource it, I'd love to have a conversation with you. It's much better to buy infill blocks in Brisbane between 5 and 20 k's of the city if you can afford them. Otherwise, directly on the beachside suburbs. The average size of a block of land in Brisbane is 400 square metres. If you can find a bigger block, even better. We talked about those things to focus on and the things to avoid in Brisbane. Remember that builders are negotiable in Brisbane, as are the developers, and just because they tell you a price doesn't mean it really is what it is. New properties get great rental returns in Brisbane and are in very strong demand if they're high quality houses in the right suburb. And parts of the wider Brisbane area, southeast Queensland, you can actually do that great little dual income product as well if that's something worth your while. So thank you so much. If you haven't already subscribed, please feel free to do so. If you've got any other videos you'd like me to record, please chuck them in the comments section, and good luck investing up here. Bye.